So we're going to jump right into reports. His Excellency Vice Governor General Tom Pogge was unable to make the Northern Lieutenancy meeting. He's up in the Northwest Lieutenancy this weekend for the Alaska, and then he's going to fly to Hawaii for the Western. So, Hawaii's not part of our lieutenancy, so we're not able to have our meeting in Hawaii, or Alaska for that matter. But I'm certainly they're having an enjoyable time. Tom and Ann Hartz are so dedicated to the order. As he took on this position of Vice Governor General, they've traveled immensely to lots of different lieutenancies to try to spread the word of the importance of the Holy Land, importance of the needs. So Tom's done a great job with that, and our prayers for his safety and Ann's safety for all the travel. So I have his report, which I'll try to stumble through. You know how that is. You try to do a report for that's not yours. So it's not. I read it over a couple of times, but one of the main primary purposes of our membership is spirituality. Cardinal Filoni, when he was selected as the Grand Master, came into office a few years back. He really wanted us to refocus on not just the generosity, not just the giving, not that, but really he wants to grow the spirituality of the members. As Tom says here, spirituality begets charity and love. So it all begins with how we feel. And I think we heard some of that yesterday with Sal DeLeo's talk and with Bishop Cousins and then Bishop Barron, about how the different things all tie together to make us a good Christian human being to care for our brothers and sisters in the world. So how do we support the Christians? Many of you know this, so some of this is for our investees, of course, so they really have a good understanding. Prayer. And I think Father Pogge will speak to that, and he spoke a little bit to that Friday evening. We need to keep praying. We pray for the conversion of hearts of the people that are in power, because that's what would really help them change their hearts, change their minds, change their souls to bring peace and to bring companionship. Our financial contributions, and then pilgrimages, of course. Like I said, I was very proud that the Northern Lieutenancy, as a lieutenant, that we were able to have one of the first Catholic pilgrimages in over 2 years. And we had strong leadership with Archbishop Naumann and Bishop Rice to drive us there, to get us there. I loved Archbishop's words last evening about that. I was glad he was going to do that because I was going to ask him to do it, but I'm not sure how I was going to fit it in this morning. So, Archbishop, thank you very much for sharing those words last night. So the primary focus of the Latin Patriarchate that we support by the order is education, of course, the schools, and we'll talk a little bit about schools, and Sir Tim Milner and Dame Donna Milner will be talking a little bit at the Holy Land Commission about the schools and about the different aspects that we support and what's going on now with the capital campaign. Humanitarian aid, of course, we've spent many dollars over the last several years to help assist humanitarian aid. And then also just the pastoral care, to support the priests. There was some discussion last night about the Mass cards. We have almost $10,000 to $12,000, $14,000 a year going from our lieutenancy, at those $20 Mass stipends that goes over to the Holy Land for the Latin Patriarchate to distribute those out to the local priests there to have Masses said for our loved ones, and it makes an impact. $1,000 a month makes an impact, and I know this is done prevalently through all the lieutenancies. So it's a good way to use it, and as I think Michael said last night, I don't know that we've sent many out, and nobody's called and said, "Hey, don't do a Mass for me." And nobody's ever said that. Just what Michael said last evening. So it's a wonderful tribute to people, and they're very, normally they really express their thanks for in the Holy Land. Well, how did you do that? How do you guys do that? And that thing. So it's a great thing. So the org chart of the order, at the top, and this is pretty small letters, of course, is our Grand Master. I'm way down that chart somewhere. Can't even read it on my seat. But there is a whole diagram of org chart of the Grand Master down through the Grand Prior and the Latin Patriarchate. So it's quite an organization, as you know. So how do we stay connected with the order? We have a variety of things. We periodically send out emails with links You get the Jerusalem Cross magazines. The Northern Lieutenancy, or the North America Lieutenancy website has really become more of the dropping box for lots of things. So I'd encourage you, if you've never looked at that, Sir Tim has been very instrumental in helping get that going and putting lots of information. We have a lot of interviews on there, especially through the COVID years, and those interviews are still there. You can still go on and watch some of the interviews that we had during the COVID years, where we were doing some prayers and some talks from Samuel Youssef, from at that time Archbishop Pizzaballa, now Cardinal Pizzaballa. So it's all out there, so you can still do it. So how many are there of us? About 30,000 members worldwide. We've seen, if Knights and Dames have been coming for a number of years, that number's been staying about the same. The one fortunate part is we're replacing our deceased senior members, but we've stayed about the same as far as population of the whole order that's gone. But that's good, because we're not shrinking. So that is one thing. And bringing in new generations. We have more younger people here this year than we had last year. And we have more younger people, and we know how much of a challenge it is for the young folks to be able to, say yes to this when they're trying to raise their children. They're trying to, put their children through Catholic education, and then the college years come. And we all know how that, a lot of us, the senior members in the audience, we know what that is. We went through it all, and it's a challenge and it's a strain. So we have about almost 15,000 members in North America and 15 lieutenancies. So as far as rank, the Northern Lieutenancy, we rank about number 3 in membership numbers. The Southwestern and the Eastern, a little bit larger. Southwestern has, Texas and New Mexico, which is just huge states. And then the Eastern, of course, is all the Eastern, New York and all the big states. So we rank 3. Everyone has, we all been tasked to try to grow more. And I think a couple of years now, we've actually brought in more members than deaths. So that's one good thing. But, I don't belittle that, but it's one thing, so. So roughly the membership, has just been flat. As Tom put this graph together over the last 4 or 5 years, but at least we have not shrunk. So we still know that we have a good degree of Catholic gentlemen and ladies out there that have their hearts set on the Holy Land. So as I mentioned yesterday, the Northern Lieutenancy donated about $1.2 million last year. This is the 2024 numbers. Totally for the North American, which would be the United States and Canada, of course, last year was about 10.9. So almost $11 million. It was an increase of about $700,000 from 2023. We had some of the senior members throughout all of North America that passed away and had bequests, and we were able to donate, money and come through, and we were able to pass it right through to the Latin Patriarchate office. So it's quite successful. Thus, the whole conversation that Sir Dan Werner had yesterday with the legacy, about how we can grow the legacy and have an ongoing endowment every year. So these are the audited assets. So basically, they've got currently this is Grand Magisterium, about $4.4 million in the bank, and total assets of about $24 million. Some of those are long-term investments. A majority of $18 million. Some odds and ends for the assets. Liabilities and reserves. Again, numbers are a little bit small. All of our accounting 101, we know that assets equal liabilities and reserves, so it all matches out, and they've been audited. But probably the bigger thing is just the revenues and expenses. So roughly last year, all lieutenancies worldwide donated almost $19 million or contributed almost $19 million to the Latin Patriarchate. So as you can see, it is their budget. There isn't any other money. They only live on the money that's raised by the Knights and Dames of the Holy Sepulchre. So maybe just one smidgen of bragging rights for us. I think Northern Lieutenancy is number 3 worldwide in donations. So we should be very proud of that. So we're very proud of that. And I thank you all for your prayers and your thoughtful gifts and your contributions. It certainly makes an impact, as you know. So Tom has a slide in here on transfers. Very much the same thing, how much was transferred to the different establishments. Some are institutional, the schools, breaks down for holy masses, projects, Bethlehem University. We haven't talked a little bit about that. I think Sir Michael and Dame Mary will talk a little bit about our scholarship programs that we're doing with Bethlehem University. We're continuing to support those. So there's a variety of the way the dollars will get split up. And I had dinner with Father Pogge last night, and he gave me a few more ideas about how the dollars are split up. So we might have some conversations at the lieutenancy level about if there's an impact for us to make any influence on some things. The operational expenses is just a little bit over $2 million. So again, as we looked yesterday, we're still under that 10% Grand Magisterium wide for a nonprofit, which is always the bogey is to be under 10%. We don't want to be like some of these nonprofits that 85% go to events. Well, that's not we self-fund our events, and then we were able to send the money to the Holy Land where it's needed. So a little update on the, we'll pass over that one. The hotel. Julie and I have been in the order now for 18 years, and we've talked about the hotel every year. Monsignor Beast has been 44 years. He's probably talked about the hotel every year. So it is progressing. So for some of the investees, this project's been going on and on and on. They started excavation. They found a bunch of artifacts. They had to stop excavation. So now they're currently back into production. It's Rome, so the bishops know how Rome works, and it just takes time. But we hope to have so they actually are funding, the Fort Partners are funding a museum now to put all the artifacts. And they're actually going to integrate a few of the columns into the hotel renovations, which should be very nice. But hopefully, if anyone travels to Rome by maybe the middle to late 2027, you'll be able to stay in the hotel. But it's still going on. It's still a process. But the good part is, it's completely funded, and they're paying Fort Partners are actually, paying the rent for the Grand Magisterium office. Now they've moved to a different office because they're going to refurbish the whole office. If anybody's been in it, it's just an old European building. And so they're going to pay to renovate that too, and the Grand Magisterium's moved into a temporary office. Okay, we'll go by that. So at the end of the day, our lieutenancy is very well represented throughout the North American lieutenancies, and I know very well respected, as Father Pogge told me last night, through the Grand Magisterium office and Cardinal Pisabala. So we should be very proud of that. Just a quick word on the capital campaign that we rolled it out last year in Denver. Tim and Donna spoke so good about it. And Tim's going to speak in much more detail about some of the projects we've already been able to fund. But roughly, it's at about $7.2 million. And again, I'm very humbled to say that our lieutenancy has contributed almost $2.2 million of that $7 million. So we've done very well, and I appreciate your generosity and your concerns for this. So they're rallying this around again this year throughout all the lieutenancies to try to, get them stepping up and helping pay some funds. So, that just as a reminder, that capital campaign, and I said Tim will go into much more detail, it's renovating all the Latin Patriarchate schools and to help pay teachers, set endowments to pay Catholic teachers, because as you can imagine, the families are having a very difficult time paying tuition now. They have no jobs. And some of the things, and Tim will speak to this, is that what's good about this is now we're actually being able to hire some Christian families to help renovate the schools. So the dollar will go through a couple of times throughout our whole Christian community in the Holy Land. So it's really going to be a good thing. And I say Tim and Don are going to speak a little bit more about that. And if you have any questions, we can talk later. So.